Fire was pretty much born after I had my injury on the job and I lost my job. And I was kind of soul searching for something that was meaningful and fulfilling.
We spent 20 years in a career, and overuse injuries are pretty common. And when I looked at the career and I had a family and I had a mortgage, and if I lost my job at the fire department, how was I going to replace that and still provide for my family? Our goal is to teach firefighters that their job could end at any time, and they need to have that financial security in the background to make sure that they're set when they retire.
Hey everyone, Chris Lopez here, and we have a special episode of the Denver Real Estate Investing Podcast. So it is Fire on Fire episode 2. So quite a few months ago, I had Paul DeSalvo, who is a retired firefighter, but also a very successful real estate investor and realtor over the past couple decades, come on and share his story and what he's doing to help firefighters go out there and invest in real estate, navigate the market, and go out there and achieve financial freedom. So hence, Fire on Fire, financial independence, retire early for firefighters. And I also have Jamin Cook, who is a fellow firefighter, investor, and realtor, who is a partner with Paul in Fire on Fire, to come here on today's episode to really talk about what's going on in the marketplace for real estate, talk about where the Fire on Fire education program is, and actually go through the most important thing, 3 real-life scenarios on how they're helping firefighters and their families go out there and navigate the real estate market. Paul, welcome back.
Thanks, Chris.
Jamin, good to have you on here.
Oh, thanks. Glad to be here.
I love all the conversations we had offline, so I am thrilled for what we are talking about on here. But, Paul, let's jump into it. What is Fire on Fire?
Yeah, so Fire on Fire was pretty much born after I had my injury on the job and I lost my job. And I was kind of soul searching for something that was meaningful and fulfilling. I had just lost something that was very meaningful and fulfilling to me, and I had a huge void. So real estate was something I fell back on, went to a conference, and real quick story, it was just surrounded by people telling my story to that I had never, really done that before. And people were very impressed, and, they were talking to me about, you should start a podcast. And, I expressed how I wanted to help people, and that was my interest. And one of the guys, next to me, I don't want to take all the credit for the name, but he said, Fire on Fire. And I said, whoa, that is a great name. So firefighter to, specifically catering to these firefighters, and then the acronym for financial independence through real estate investing, great combination together. And that's how it was formed.
And some background, when did you start investing and how long have you been a realtor for? Because you've been going on it wasn't like you retired and then decided to get in real estate. Right. You've been doing this, I think, for most of your life.
Yeah, pretty much. When I started on the fire department, within a year or so, I got my real estate license, and 2 years after that, I started my own brokerage. And then from there, I became, very successful with just the, brothers and sisters on the fire department, referral based only. And from there, it was a success, had my own brokerage. And then I started investing in my own real estate portfolio.
All right, Jamin, what is the ultimate goal of the program?
Well, I think the ultimate goal of Fire on Fire, and Paul and I have been talking about this over the last 2 years, is to, and to go back, we both have had the same injuries, only my surgery was successful and I was able to return to the job. But our goal is to teach firefighters that their job could end at any time, whether it's through injury or mental health or any of that. And they need to have that plan B or that security, financial security in the background to make sure that they're set when they retire. So through knowledge and education and guidance, we're hoping to teach them that.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I like about you guys a lot, and obviously why I'm having the podcast or doing more collaborations together, is that, my philosophy is to go out there and add value. You educate, you provide consults. You're not there selling, but you're out there providing value. And no matter what, hey, if I provide value to the investor or the person, great, that's job number one. And then some of those people will come work or do business with us. And I love that approach is, hey, you guys are out there are always willing to like give people advice or recommend things, right? You go talk to this person or do, oh, you're doing with this person. That's phenomenal. Here's a couple of ideas. Keep doing it. And so I want to add on there. I love the education first approach you guys do, because that is a big core of my personal philosophy. Now, Paul, why focus on just firefighters with this program? I mean, it's real estate investing. Everyone's getting real estate investing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I come from a very special family. Being a firefighter, you have a very special family. And after what happened to me, I want to educate these guys on, you know, whether it be just through age, mental injury, physical injury, this job is dangerous and it's over before you know it. And you have to retire much earlier. Even if you have a full, successful career without being injured, you can't be a firefighter when you're 60 years old. So I want to make sure, because of my circumstances, luckily for me, I was able to fall back on my real estate. I went through a very, a depression. And luckily I had that there because I didn't have to worry about providing for myself and my family. I had my real estate and I could relax and take care of myself. And I had that real estate to depend on. And so I want that for other people. And that's, you know, just like you were talking about value, I'm not expecting anything back from these guys. I want to provide a value to these guys. Usually there's a 1-for-1 kind of take and give. And mine is just give. And the satisfaction I get from helping people is all I need. And if I can help somebody succeed and be successful in life, that is extremely satisfying for me.
And talk about how, I mean, I don't want to try to, talk about your guys' careers in specifics, but I know you guys have both held leadership positions. You've been in the department for quite a few years, but how did your guys' partnership on Fire and Fire happen?
Well, I kind of searched out Jamin a little bit and we started talking a lot. Jamin was getting his real estate license. So he was talking to me a lot about, you know, what were the ins and outs of it all. And I saw his passion for it. I saw his passion for helping other people. And, you know, it was a lot like me, very selfless. He'll do anything for anybody. And that's where I came from. He was a VP and a president of the union. So we both were served on the board together for many years. And I saw his passion of helping people. And that's what brought us together. We just started talking about real estate. And then I brought up the Fire on Fire and he was all in. So it was great.
And then Jim, I can ask the same question because I know as you become a realtor, especially with your work ethic and your leadership position, a lot of people have wanted to work with you or get you to kind of be partners with them. What attracted you to Paul and Fire on Fire?
I think we had the same goals in mind, right? And that extends from just being the firefighter. We're public servants and helping people. Nobody got into it for the money, but at the, it's a career. So just helping people it's ingrained in us, I guess.
Absolutely.
So when Paul and I were talking, he was actually one of kind of the guys that got me into it, into real estate and investing when I had my injury and almost lost my job. So we've been talking about real estate since then. And
so was your injury what got you into investing and being a realtor? Was that kind of the advantage or the trigger?
Yeah. And so, I'm an open book about that. So, we spent 20 years in a career and, overuse injuries are pretty common. And I ended up with a ruptured disc in C6, C7 and lost my left arm. And I was without a left arm for probably about 6 months before I had surgery, and my surgery worked. And I still have some residual issues, but I have other injuries that either are just overuse or whatever. But I did hardwood floor installation for a long time. And when I looked at the career and I had a family and I had a mortgage, and if I lost my job at the fire department, how was I going to replace that and still provide for my family? And it wasn't going to be through hardwood floors, because if I couldn't do the fire job, I wasn't going to be able to do hardwood floors. And I had some interest in investing. I'd done it in the past, but didn't have great guidance until now. So Paul and I had been talking, and I looked at all the guys in the firehouse that didn't need the job if they didn't have to. And they had investments. And they had a second income coming in, and it's not, people call it passive, but it's a lot of work, but it's rewarding as well in the long, when you look at the big picture.
Yeah.
So I stepped outside my comfort zone and and got my real estate license and have been working toward the investment since.
Great.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to shift the conversation because, hey, there is educating and helping people from a high level talking, and then there's actually executing and, hey, great, actually getting down to brass tacks, how people go out there and invest. And, no matter kind of what phase in the real estate cycle or market we're in, it's always complex. It's always scary. It's either things are about to crash or people thinks they're crashing is generally the general sentiment out there. And also, no matter what market cycle it is, there's always opportunities. That was a big thing I learned years ago, and something I want to spend a few minutes talking about on where the market is and what type of opportunities. Because it's not a yes, no, oh, this is a bad time to invest in real estate. It's no, there are certain parts of real estate where these certain strategies and types of investments make a lot of sense, and some don't. So I think there's some are just better performing right now. So, right now where we sit in the market, we're probably right around peak interest rates, or they just lowered some, but we have very high interest rates. Price have continued to stay very high. I mean, some markets have seen a little bit of price drop, but overall Denver Metro and most of the front range in Colorado has seen continued appreciation. It's been very modest compared to, 2010 to 2020-ish, but we've still seen prices appreciate. So what that means there is we're not expecting some big price crash. I don't think, no data is forecasting we should be seeing a big price crash. And since we're about 2 years of high interest rates and prices are still going strong, that looks like the way it'll be. Now, what that's done is it's changed a lot of the old investing strategies. It's also made it harder for people to go out there and invest. It's harder for a new investor to get out there. It's more complex. There's fewer options. It's also harder for current landlords out there who built a lot of wealth in the last market cycle. What they did a lot of times is like, hey, the same thing they did is no longer working in today's market cycle. So I want to go through 3 avatars. When I say avatars, these are real, firefighters that you've helped in real estate, and we'll leave everyone's name out of here, but 3 firefighters that will kind of tell their stories from a high level that really represents like the 3 main avatars or types of people you help in the current market cycle. So, Jamin, for the first one, we will put this person as a newer investor, maybe newer to the force, or new to investing, and they want to get into real estate investing. And a lot of times these people, or the firefighter, they're renting, they don't own a house yet, they don't live close to their fire station, but they're trying to figure out, hey, how can I go out there and really get started in my career, and also go out there and start building wealth in real estate. So, like, what options does that investor have?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got one example of that within our department, and I think that this, I think anybody who's new into the fire service or is renting, it's the ability to go and buy a house and not be mortgage poor. So this firefighter bought his first house, and he is now renting out rooms in his house to other firefighters. So he's covering all of his mortgage, if not more. And so he's house hacking. So it's worked out well for him. He's been able to afford the house. Plus he's gaining appreciation slowly as the years go on. And he's putting money into his pocket every month because it's not going into his mortgage.
Yeah, and so the term here, Jamin said, is called house hacking. If you guys want to go Google it or learn the industry jargon, house hacking is the most popular term for this, where someone comes and buys a property as an owner occupant, and they live there. And a lot of times will rent out a couple bedrooms or Airbnb out a basement. But the reason people do it is if you go in there and buy a place as an owner occupant, you can put 0 to 5% down on the purchase price. Versus if Paul's coming out there, he and his wife would go out there and buy an investment property, they're usually putting down 25%. And 5% or 25% of $500,000 is still a good chunk of money, but 5% is a lot less of it. And then rent out a couple of bedrooms. A lot of times a person's in the house for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, and sometimes they're living for mortgage free.
Yeah.
And it's not a permanent thing. You live there for a year or two, move out and convert it to a rental property. And then you repeat that a couple of times. So it's really good for, I'll say, a lot of times, new or younger is the most common avatar on there, or anyone wants to go out there and just put a little bit of sweat equity in the property as well. but it's an absolutely amazing opportunity. Because you guys have told me some horror stories of like someone joins the force or joins the department and they're stationed in, Littleton or Highlands Ranch where you and I live, Jamin, but then they're like, they live an hour away because they can't afford to come there. So in that situation, does house hacking still work around a lot of these high priced houses around some of these fire stations?
Yeah, I think it works well. I mean, you look at the rents and rents aren't, they're not going up. In fact, they're flattening out to going down a little bit, right? But you're still able to make, you're not making a $3,500 mortgage payment, right? You're only paying $1,000 out of your pocket, or maybe you're breaking even depending on where you're at and how much you put down. So everybody's situation is a little bit different, but it's working and it's getting you closer to the firehouse. It's getting you in your district. I mean, we have guys that are living in Wyoming. We have guys that are living in Nebraska. So it's an opportunity to be close. Yeah. And still be able to afford a house and put money back into your pocket.
And I think too, Jim, you said you're renting out one of your bedrooms to a firefighter, right?
Yeah.
Your primary?
Yeah. So my wife and I are in a different situation. We've owned our house for a while, and our kids are older and out of the house. So we have a 5-bedroom house, and we have a rookie firefighter in the academy. And he lives in Wyoming, and he comes down for academy and stays at our house, pays rent, and then goes back on the weekends to be back with his family. So it works out for him, works out for us, puts money back in my pocket as well.
Yeah. So anyone out there, it is a phenomenal strategy. I definitely recommend you do deep dive into it. I've helped a lot of clients over the years. And I mean, I've got some clients, they started this 8 or 10 years ago, and now they're multimillionaires who have left their job. These are non-firefighters, but they've left, a 6-figure W-2 job in finance just by every year or two buying a house, putting some sweat equity in there to improve it, renting some bedrooms, self-managing to move out, but they've built multi-million-dollar real estate portfolios. It's not sexy, but you do it for 10 years. You have such a high probability of being a multimillionaire. It's definitely worth checking into.
Yeah.
Now, the second type of avatar, and Paul, this was a story. I think this was actually, a client both you and Jamie and me were working together, but not necessarily an investor, but a very common example where someone inherits a property from a family member, from a parent. And a lot of times it's a paid off property in a nice part of town. And the person's trying to figure out, hey, what the heck do I do with the property? Do I move into it? Do I turn it into a rental? Do I sell it? What do I do? Can you kind of talk about this story and how you helped this person, understand their options and navigate the market?
Yeah. Jamin actually knew this guy. He worked at a neighboring department, and we got together, all three of us, with his wife, so the 4 of us, and we sat down and talked about his situation. And we ran some scenarios. So I sat down and looked at, a 1031 versus selling it, renting it out. And we put all those scenarios together. We spent hours with him and went over all of these scenarios. We mailed it to him and gave him a chance to look it all over. And, one was very clear, like the 1031 wasn't going to work because nowadays, right now, it's hard to 1031 into something that's going to cash flow. So
what is a 1031 exchange?
Well, basically, you're using the government's money to use a down payment tax-free. So you don't have to pay taxes on it when you buy another like-kind property that is of equal value or greater. Yeah. So a 1031 can be very advantageous for taxes, but it's not always necessary. Especially you got to look at the market. You got to look at what's going on. So sometimes it's not always the way to go. So in this circumstance, it was also a family property. So she at the time was not interested in really selling the property. Yeah. So we kind of looked at some other options of renting it out, remodeling it, renting it out, and going from there. So Jim can add on a little bit more to this story too. But we ran a bunch of scenarios. They're still looking through it. There's a bunch of stuff that they're considering. They didn't understand what basis was. When you inherit a property, that basis changes. So she didn't understand, selling the property. She was really worried about all the taxes she was going to have to pay, but she had a whole new stepped up basis. So you got to that's a very complicated term, so you'll have to look that up for.
But
that's
it
for
means
another
if she
episode.
sold, she would owe very little taxes.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So that was another option that she wasn't even aware of that we brought to her attention, and that kind of opened up, And then talking about just a light remodel, renting those things out, and what they could rent them for, and how much money they could cash flow. So it was really interesting and enlightening for them when they opened up their eyes, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, there's so many options available, and we didn't realize this." So it was nice to see.
Well, I think for them, he's in the drop, and what that is a deferred retirement plan that most fire departments have. So he's getting ready to retire in the next 2 to 3 years, and so going into retirement and affording health care, this was going to be, the cash return or monthly return that they were going to get would help them get into or help them pay for healthcare.
Yep.
The other side of it is their son is in school in California, so that also helps supplement some of that as well. And it was a lock off. So they had upstairs, they had downstairs. They could rent that with its own entrance in the basement, so they could rent out both upstairs and downstairs and make some money on it.
And I mean, to kind of take a step back here, because guys, I'm probably use some terms people don't know about, but I'm glad you did, because it shows that there's so much more to real estate. Oh, how much could I sell this property for? You guys are able to look at as realtors for the highest and best use, as investors to understand, hey, what type of returns could we bring in from cash flow, different strategies, should we sell it? And also know how that kind of like could parlay into, the retirement issues that firefighters are facing. But you guys presented options. I always call it the buffet. You're like, hey, here's a buffet of options. Some of the stuff is better than others, but here's a whole buffet. Really focus on these 2 or 3, but you guide the client to help figure out what's right for them, which I so appreciate. All right, we got the third one here. Now, this was a surprising thing as to me, Paul, as you and I got to start working together. How many firefighters are landlords? When we first started talking, we got in touch, and I saw your report. I was like, "Holy smoke!" I was like, "Who are you, Mr. Firefighter?" And then we started meeting some of your friends who had other portfolios. And I was absolutely amazed at how many firefighters just own properties. And so I know there's a segment of firefighters where they own, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 rental properties, and they're in a different phase of, their career and also what options they have in their real estate portfolio. Can you kind of talk about what those firefighter investors, what options they have?
Yeah, it was eye-opening for me too. I didn't, when I got into real estate, I, talking to more like kind of people, I traveled across the nation with our position on the union, and I would talk to guys across the nation that had properties. We'd have a group of us together and we talk about our investments and property. And these guys were really into it, but they also didn't realize what they were sitting on and what they had. And, I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I had the experience, and I started talking to these guys. And one great example, a guy that works on our fire department, he had a rental property, and we started talking, and he was just curious about his options. He didn't know what to do. There was an emotional attachment to it because his wife, they got married there, they had their kids there, and they held on to it as a rental for years and years and years in a very prime area of Denver. And this is an example of a lot of people that just don't realize what they're sitting on and, what their options are. So we guided him through it, and we listed it for him. And he was really like, you know what, I want to wait a little bit. I'm not sure. But we found out that he was in that window where the 2 out of 5 years, if he got out of that in the next couple of months, he'd be able to get away tax-free, which he didn't realize. So
I probably saved him tens of thousands of dollars in taxes, right?
Yes.
And we're talking not chump change. We're talking.
Yeah. And his wife, she was like, you know what? I don't want to sell it. I want to wait a little while. But when she heard how much money they could save if they could get rid of that property in the next couple of months, she was all in. She's
money
like,
talks, right?
Absolutely, 100%. And, people don't know what they don't know. So, it was really satisfying. Jamin and I walked him through all the scenarios and looked at, what they could sell it for. And we got it listed, sold it in a couple of days, and he got a great investment, return on that property. And now he's reinvesting it in some outside things other than real estate. He was looking at what do I go into? So we discussed that with him and said, the market's just not right now for, buying another property. Doesn't make sense. But there are some debt funds. There are some real estate funds that are very attractive right now. And he jumped into those. It took him a while to understand it, but once he understood it, he was all in.
Great. So, one of the things that we've talked about a lot too, and how do you educate people, at scale or, at mass through webinars and classes all there, there's only so much you can teach through webinar or through a class. And it's okay, great. I get the idea, but they need that one-on-one advice. All three of those examples of investors we talked about, y'all did in-depth consultations with them. And I think that's something that's so important for people to realize is, hey, get the idea, educate yourself, and then sit down with Paul and Jamin and go out there and do a strategy session. If you're new to the market, or if you have a portfolio, do a portfolio review and say, hey, here's my portfolio. What can I do? Could you guys walk me through, when you sit down with someone, what's the process you go through to help them understand their situation and their options?
So I think, first off, there's a tool out there that you can evaluate your property or your investments, right? And that Property Llama is what we've been using, thanks to Chris Lopez here. But that gives you an idea of where what your stance is at that time, and you where you're sitting from the beginning, and that helps out a lot. So that's the first place we send them, and then usually we just sit down with them, have a conversation, evaluate what their portfolio looks like and what their options are.
Yeah, it's a great tool. When I met with Chris, I put my properties in there, and myself, even having the experience that I had, looking at the metrics that Property Llama looks at was something totally different than I've ever looked at before. The return on equity was very meaningful and impactful to me when I saw that. And when other people look at that I've started just kind of getting used to the software and figuring it all out. And now I can kind of understand it and explain it to people. People open up their eyes too. And they're like, wow, I didn't realize that I could use that equity and invest it in something else. I'm not making anything on that equity. When you look at 4 or 5% return on your equity, you can make that easily in a savings account nowadays. So to maximize and make that money work, that software really helps you open up your eyes and realize that there are other opportunities out there where you can make a lot more money.
Great. And if you guys ever want to sit down and use a tool, propertyllama.com. And of course, Paul and Jamin's contact details will be below the podcast. So connect with them to sit down and just, have a conversation. And it's a combination of, hey, here's what works in the market. Here's where you are in life and your goals and what you can do financially and, living wise and sweat equity wise. And then also what strategies work for this current marketplace. And you kind of look at all that and say, hey, cool, here is a sweet spot based on these factors that make the most sense for the investor. All right, guys. So we got a couple months left here. I want to go through just some, common questions people have, because I always try to put myself back into place. Hey, when I buy my first property, or anytime I kind of come talking about to buy new property for myself or sell a property, I go through my own emotional roller coaster. And so what are some of the common questions you're getting, and also maybe misconceptions or roadblocks that people are having that are holding them back? What's the most common objection you get right now, Paul, when people come to real estate investing?
The most common objection that I hear is, number one, is the fear of the unknown. People don't know about investing or how to do it. They believe that it's very risky. And the second is money. Money is, where am I going to come up with the money for a down payment on a house? But a lot of people don't realize that there are a lot of programs out there, especially for first responders, firefighters. You can get into a house for close to nothing. Especially for these young guys, that is an opportunity, an unbelievable opportunity to get into a house and do the house hack, and just keep doing that over and over again. And by the time in the middle of your career, end of your career, you're a millionaire with a lot of property. So I wish I knew that when I was younger. Definitely.
What's the most common question you get, Jamin?
It's really just I'll go back to what Paul said, the fear. That's what everybody's biggest issue is with investing or getting into it. And then I think you can mitigate that through education and guidance, right? And putting yourself in the right situation. And that's putting yourself into a group of people that are doing it and having conversations and working through those problems. And then the next one would be, how do I do it? I don't know how to do it.
And so I know when we first, we did the first podcast, we taught a class together. There was lots of interest in the education component and the execution component for the Fire and Fire community you guys are building here. How can people get plugged in and learn more for, networking, masterminding, education, being more with like-minded investors? What's the best way for people to get plugged into the community, Paul?
Well, basically, you can get a hold of Jamin and I. Jamin's obviously still on the department, easily accessible. We have an email, fireonfire@gmail.com. You guys can just email us. I can give my phone number out. We'll post that in the notes. We're happy to do that. And, just word of mouth is really, we had a couple of classes and it spread like wildfire. We had to slow down a little bit. I had some medical issues, but it was taken off. And we kind of pulled back a little bit, but we're back in now, and we want to start that excitement back up again. But yeah, that's the easiest way to get a hold of us.
Yeah. And, as we kind of wrap up this podcast, we've sat down and talked more, hey, how can you educate more people? The goal here is to do, one educational podcast a month, around the Fire and Fire community with, strategies, you're interviewing other, investor firefighters, and then coupled with some classes, and also a lot of times like small group masterminds or happy hours to get people like in there so they can come network, talk to other people, but also be around like-minded people. So Jamin, thank you for coming out. Paul, thank you.
Thank you.
This was a great podcast. I'm looking forward to our once a month podcast goal.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I'm excited.
Thanks for having us out.
Yep. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.